Hi everyone. I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my novel that's not in progress. And just to give you some context, there's a fictional memoir within the novel, and it's a memoir of drug and sex addiction, and this is from the prologue of the memoir, which also serves as the prologue to the novel. And just to emphasize, this is a fictional memoir, and I am, in fact, not addicted to drugs or sex. So, yeah. Right. There's nothing wrong with that. So here we go. Long ago seemed the memories of my most recent past, meth-fueled nightmares both dreamt and real, of waking in pools of my own vomit, in the stench and stain of my own urine, or in some strange bed, tangled up in some strange man, staring at his back that was as blank and indistinguishable as his face, and as blank and indistinguishable as my own. In retrospect, all the crazy, reckless sex I'd had, all the drugs I'd inhaled, shot, and smoked, all the money I'd made and lost, were more things I could not account for. I had meted out the one thing that left me most profoundly bankrupt. I had given away my self-worth. So I found myself suffering the coldest weather Beijing had seen in over 40 years. As the invading Mongols had hundreds of years earlier, merciless Siberian air passed over the Great Wall, which formed the spine of the Yanshan Mountains that bordered the city to the north. Irrespective of the lashing winds, the temperature barely hovered above 0 degrees for days. Gray and cold polluted, the sky itself looked ashamed, as if it had forgotten the very meaning of winter, and the tears it shed at its own forgetfulness were consumed by the cold, and pressed into glass that reflected everything below with a bitter clarity. Beijing, and indeed China, was ripe with change as the past collided with the present and the future. Within the confines of the Forbidden City, or the Temple of Heaven, were gorgeous structures of ruby lacquered columns supporting steep angled roofs that were gilded and tiled, while intricate designs accented in sapphire blue and emerald green filled out the imperial palette. These were the colors of the Middle Kingdom. Beyond the sloping, snow-dusted roofs of these monuments, once existed the maze of hutongs, commercial and residential lanes named after craftsmen or merchant specialties, such as Cobbler's Alley and skewed Tobacco Pouch Street. But now in place of the disappearing hutongs lay rust-orange construction cranes, brown squat box buildings, steel gray towers, and billowing white smoke. The palette and landscape of the future was indeed different. China was desperately trying to manifest its destiny, even if it had to cannibalize its own past to do so. Some would say that is progress, and I wouldn't completely disagree. The past can be a place for useless sentimentality, a monument to our most primal desires and fears that are perhaps unknowingly, perversely adored and cherished. When that's true, we must raise the past for the sake of the future. But in order to do so, the past must first be confronted, because there are things from which we cannot run. Personal truths and personal destiny are the same thing, and the truth always finds a way of bearing itself out. I ventured out to the city's northeast and finally arrived at Lambda Temple, one of the most revered bastions of Buddhism in this country. The scene was overwhelming, not for the handsome temple which one encountered upon entering, nor for the numerous temples of varying sizes that radiated out from it like an echo, but for the throngs of people armed with yard-long bundles of jewel-colored incense. The devoted, the despondent, and the dilettantes like myself had all braved the bone-chilling weather, ourselves bundled up, men sporting parkas and scarves, women turned out in boot-cut jeans and high-heeled boots. China, you had come a long way, baby. In the courtyard of the first temple, beneath the watchful stares of the ferocious stone lions that stood guard, worshippers lit their incense by tipping them into bathtub-sized iron cauldrons that had flames licking at their sides, fueled by the incense other devotees had abandoned within. Facing the temple, beneath an arching cypress tree that seemed to be fanning the smoke, some worshippers knelt on low wooden benches laid upon the flagstones. Like China itself, my own reckoning with the past played out against the markedly different landscape of the present. The gravity of these devotees at Lama Temple, not dispossessed or hyphenated, worshipping out in the open in such a grandiose setting, was a far cry from my own experience, where the huddled masses yearned for prosperity in the beautiful country, by praying in the back rooms of storefront temples on Chinatown's Elizabeth Street, next to shop-worn pharmacies and Chinese bric-a-brac stores. Or even my parents' own home altar, a modestly small, claw-footed urn made of heavy metal, set atop a small wooden bookcase, flanked by offerings of oranges and gladiolas, and by those who controlled our fortunes, 2 statues of the fat, smiling, and half-naked Buddha and the goddess of mercy. At home, the incense we burned as immigrants was much more modest, only about a foot long, colored a dull red-brown like dried blood. My parents would light 2 or 3 sticks at a time, bringing a match or cigarette lighter to their tips, make their silent vespers, bow a few times, and then stake the burning incense into the inches of ash in the urn, collected over months, if not years, of praying. I would watch these slow-burning sticks as they curled over at their tops and turned gray, disintegrated from the glowing, hot, thin red band that moved down their shafts as the setting sun disappears below the horizon. But despite my parents' devotion to their gods, for long as I could remember, I suspected they were not my gods, nor anyone else's. I had spent my whole life trying to prove it, or been waiting to be proved wrong. As my parents' dreams rose, diffused, and evaporated like incense smoke, so too had mine. My relationship, my career and reputation, my sense of identity, all that I had built up had been razed. These were all deaths of a kind, but who was I to blame other than myself? My mourning of all these deaths was a sign of our collective nature, an acknowledgement of our own helplessness, our subjugation to pain and suffering. And I realized what we all ultimately surrendered to is the religion of humility. Humility was death in all its guises. I stepped into one of the souvenir shops and purchased incense that came in a box too lovely to be thrown away. But that was one of the charms of this disappearing world. Plastic, cellophane, and bubble wrap had not quite encroached upon every aspect of life here. Instead, there were small, delicate rings of colored paper which bundled the incense like rubber bands, a box made with some version of cardboard and paper itself, and hand-lettered in brush calligraphy that I could not read. I did not mean to fetishize this box and this ritual, one of the most sacred of acts here in this world, but I could not help it. I was not of this world or that world. I was in between places, saw between things, inhabited a place that was like sinew and tendon, a place where things connect and disconnect. Thank you.